Avdiivka was abandoned by the Ukrainian defense forces, which was not surprising given the situation and the need to be realistic. This small town near the Donetsk was a huge drain on Russian resources for more than 4 months, causing unprecedented damage to their military equipment and personnel. But what will happen after the capture of the city, and how will events unfold in the combat zone? Even Russian war correspondents, so-called mil bloggers, and unit commanders who have the right to voice their opinion, admit that their losses in battle for Avdiivka are significantly greater than in battle for Bakhmut. While Russian armchair ultra-patriots rejoiced at the capture of a small town covering an area of just 29 square kilometers, mid-level command staff on the ground are horrified by the resources expended by the Russian armed forces for this endeavor. According to reliable data from various sources, the losses of equipment by the invaders from October 10, 2023 to the end of January 2024 ranged from 400 to 600 units, and taking into account the verification methods and the actual coefficients, the real equipment losses by Russians in the battle for Avdiivka could have reached or even surpassed 1,000 units. 1,000 tanks, armored vehicles, artillery, and other equipment in battle for a small town that is not even a regional or district capital, and actually a part of Donetsk agglomeration. This agglomeration has been under occupation since 2014. The losses of human resources, of personnel among the Russians are staggering. Numbers of 15, 20,000 and more are reported as killed only. But what matters is that since the second half of 2022, the Russian invaders have not managed to seize any major large-scale city, settling for small towns and villages. A year has passed since the capture of Bakhmut, and now the Russian occupation forces have taken the small Avdiivka. But how significant was it for them and for us? From the start of the offensive on this town, Russian propaganda constantly fed the public the story that Avdiivka would shield Donetsk from attacks of the Ukrainian defense forces and pave the way to the city of Dnieper. As for the first claim, Avdiivka was never a launchpad for Donetsk and its vicinity. Accurate strikes on the Russian invader targets were executed using means that did not need to be in or near the city. Regarding the road to the city of Dnieper, that's partially true, as it concerns the northern and southern routes to Pokrovsk via M04 and some other road. There are 2 roads there. They both lead to Pokrovsk, and then from Pokrovsk to Pavlograd, and then to the city of Dnieper. But mind you, this is a distance of 200 kilometers. It took occupiers 4 months to cover a distance of 2 kilometers, to break through to Avdiivka, and then to engage in urban warfare while giving up advancement in open fields and losing nearly 1,000 units of equipment and tens of thousands of personnel. The question arises, during the advance to the city of Dnieper, what will run out for the Russians first, equipment or personnel? In reality, Avdiivka was seen by the Russian command as a window of opportunity to showcase a quick victory on the eve of Putin's direct line in December, and then towards New Year's Eve, and now with Putin's address to the Federal Assembly looming, it leads to the Russian moving into some suicidal assaults. In truth, Avdiivka held no tactical or strategic importance for the Russians. Russian generals simply believed it could be quickly surrounded and captured, and when the offensive failed miserably, it was already too late to stop. For us, besides Avdiivka being a Ukrainian city, its importance lies in being the best example of using tactics of exhaustion to the enemy. And in its time, Bakhmut became a trap for Russian occupiers, especially for the Wagner private military company, who disappeared after this battle. Avdiivka, however, outdid Bakhmut in all aspects. And also for us, it was a fortified area that allowed us to exhaust the enemy for a long time, inflicting losses to them far greater than those suffered by the Ukrainian defense forces. Russian commanders have had to concentrate forces and resources in Avdiivka from other directions and other footholds, and increasing the total forces in these small locations up to 60,000. And the most combat-ready brigades from the 2nd and 41st Combined Armies of the Group Center lost their combat capability here. Units of 90th tank divisions were worn down, and the losses of the 1st Army Corps are counted in the thousands. Avdiivka's role in wearing down and exhausting the enemy lasted as long as was possible. When these opportunities were exhausted and the situation worsened, the city began to be abandoned. But what comes next? What did Russian occupiers do after capturing Bakhmut? They were so exhausted that they didn't move towards Slavyansk or even Ivanivka, Khromovo and Chasiv Yar. They spent almost a year licking their wounds, losing locations around the city, Klishivka and Andriivka, and behind Andriivka the lines of Ukrainian defense begin, prepared to meet the enemy. One of them starts right after Koksahim, passes along the city limit, and further south, taking into consideration the landscape and logistics. Each village represents a fortified object, the capture which is no easy task. A vivid example of it is Stepovo, which the Russians still haven't taken control of, despite it being adjusted to the front line for over 2 months. Or Severna, which 55th and 74th separate motorized rifle brigades of the 41st Combined Arms Army failed to capture during the entire offensive. And here lies the cruel truth for Russian ultra-patriots. In the current situation, Avdiivka gives the Russian occupation forces absolutely nothing. Anyone who wants to challenge this statement must answer a simple question: what's next? Apparently, we will see the same sequence of events as after the occupation of Bakhmut. First, Putin will exploit this capture fully for his purposes, showcasing Avdiivka before the Federal Assembly, then during so-called elections, and at the same time Russia's information space will be bursting with heroic stories about how one Buryat from a trench took down 2 Apaches with a single shot. Avdiivka will be cultivated until the end of the elections and then for some time after to stimulate mobilization processes, and then it will be forgotten, just like Bakhmut. It will be forgotten because after Avdiivka there won't be any swift or heroic breakthroughs. Instead, there will likely be a redistribution of attention to other sectors of the front, where freed up units can, participate in new offensives. The priority for the Russian command is Kupiansk, Chasiv Yar, Novomikhailivka, as well as the resumptions of the offensive towards Ugledar and in Zaporizhia region, reclaiming territories lost in 2023 near Verbove and Rabotino. Units from the Central Group may be returned to their area of responsibility or even reinforce the West Group. The Avdiivka area will fall under the responsibility of the 1st Army Corps and will turn into a slow-moving positional confrontation. But for the Ukrainian armed forces, the important task now is to set up steady defenses on all possible directions of breakthrough and movement of Russian forces. Defenses that will take not days or weeks, but months for enemy to overcome. Every field, forest, landscape feature must be turned into an unbreakable fortress, the capture of which will cost Russians enormous sacrifices and time. Avdiivka created opportunities and conditions for the preparation of all of the above. And even after the capture, these conditions will remain favorable for us for some time. So, to conclude, Avdiivka became a clear example of how to maximize opportunities for exhausting the enemy. Even during World War II, there was no ratio of losses of 1 to 10 or even higher, as in especially intense moments of Russian offensive. The Russian command wasted an unproportionately huge amount of resources in battle for Avdiivka, with virtually zero payoff. Of course, some generals will receive a new badge, promotion, and personal congratulations from Putin, but all of this is nothing more than a cover-up for Russian adepts of the war, who need to be explained that the losses which the Russian didn't even suffer in battle for Kiev, and remind you that in battle for Kiev they lost about less than 4,000, like 3,900 personnel killed. And all these losses are justified in the battle for the small town of Avdiivka, which most Russians hadn't even known of until October 10, 2023. Thank you for your attention. Have a nice day, and Slava Ukraini!